Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Book of Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley and this is a special book club edition of the Author Talks podcast, a podcast to hear the behind the scenes stories, ideas, and writing journeys of authors. This episode is brought to you by Bookem, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookemapp.com. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe to our channel. My guest today is the Renaissance man himself, Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm is the author of What Winners Won't Tell You, our Bookem Club Pick of May. He is an American football player, a two-time Super Bowl champ, and a three-time Pro Bowler. He's a founder of the Malcolm Jenkins Foundation, Broad Street Ventures, Malcolm Inc., to name a few. He is a football player, an activist, an entrepreneur, a culture builder, an art connoisseur, a community leader. He's a Super Bowl champ. He is an investor, a writer, a son, and a father. Malcolm, welcome to the Author Talks podcast. I kind of want to start with growing up. You sung the lift every voice and sing song as a kid, which I thought was really unique from the book. It's also sung at the Super Bowl now. So I'm interested in hearing, growing up in those younger years, what seeds were planted from like a social justice standpoint that kind of helped you get into who you are during at your playing career, but also what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was the sense of identity. And I talk about that in the book. I went to Chad School, which was an all-black private school in Newark, New Jersey. It's still around today as a foundation, but when it was in a school, I was, part of this student body. And from kindergarten up, you learned about identity, black inventors, black history, people who've contributed to society. We did plays every week. Somebody presented a history lesson, whether it's Marcus Garvey or Malcolm X and all of these folks. So you learned very much or very early how to have pride in your own identity, how to build community with one another. We refer to our teachers and educators as brother and sister. So it was very much ingrained that we are kind of this tribal community that rely on each other, that understands history and memory, and brings that alongside of our education.
Yeah, I love to hear that. Just it kind of brings in that whole Renaissance personality that you have and how you've built. Talk to me a little bit about just like growing up. Like, was there any specific memories that are moments? I know you tell some childhood stories about your grandma and father and mom and helping them keep you stay out of trouble. People, yeah, I think you had a friend that even was trying to move you into some different situations. Talk to us a little bit about that, just growing up in Jersey and some of those moments.
Yeah, I think, man, one of the things that it's a narrative that you see in multiple scenarios that show up in the book, but it's what I learned growing up in New Jersey is just how to navigate responsibility. It's not as responsibility as a bigger brother, having responsibility to take care of my younger brother. I have a scene where my grandmother sends me back outside to go fight a bully because as a responsibility, I got to be a protector. I have other things and, I got to do. And so just learning those, even what it means to be a real friend. I talk about, my friend deterring me from getting caught up in gang life and what it really means to truly have people who advocate for you. And I really go through that really throughout my entire life. That really didn't change through my adulthood, even in my childhood. So I think it's one of those things, just navigating responsibility. Sometimes those responsibilities are forced upon us. Sometimes we choose them, but they're sometimes difficult to navigate. So I'm just really showcasing the ins and outs, the failures, and what I've learned from and the successes.
Yeah, were you always a writer? Because it seemed like it came through a lot through your book, and then even now some of the stuff you're doing with your Substack. Can you talk just a little bit about kind of growing up and some of your writing in those moments too?
Yeah, I used to write, but never really was concentrated on it. I never saw it as a valuable medium. And I think as I've gotten, as I became an athlete and was looking for my voice, around 2016, we are doing protests. I realized that op-eds and long form writing was a better medium for me. I get frustrated with social media. You only got a certain amount of characters. You got to compete with the kind of popcorn, microwave attention span of everybody. And you really don't end up having true dialogue or real thought out, thoughts and commentary. So writing and doing that first with my book gave me the tools and understanding of how to structure it, what the process is to kind of go about getting your thoughts out and into a well thought out long form. And now what you see me doing is practicing that with my Substack It's a place where I can look at the things around me. I can go through my own files and history and do small essays and just continue to, work out my pen the same way I used to work out,
Yep.
my muscles getting ready for games.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And you break it down in those three sections. You talk about love, art, and war, and all those things and how they play. Talk to us a little bit about that. Like you're talking about building Black wealth and leadership and legacy, but through these cultural means and capital and community. So talk to us about how you kind of balance those things and kind of center your messaging through your writing.
Yeah, sometimes, it's easier to have conversations about a little bit more, abstract conversations than those like direct things. So instead of talking, directly about power and war and all of these, we can talk about sports and business. And that is still resonates with people who are just trying to make it work at their job or looking for ways to invest their money. When I'm talking about my personal experiences and tying them to the cultural, things that are happening in today's context. I don't care to be like another talking head who is weighing in on what
Right.
they think about the world. What I want to do is showcase, kind of how I process things, how I see things in the world, and connect them with my own experience. And so there's not only just a learning, but there's, a doing, a living, and then being able to really just showcase that in a way that I think is a little bit more thoughtful for me. It's a more natural medium than Instagram and some of these other things where you're trying to package it and compete it for likes and things. This is really like for people who enjoy rabbit holes. If you want to, not only do you want to know about the draft, you want to know what I was wearing, you want to know what my parents were, doing, you want to see those behind the scene, moments and understand why they're relevant for what you're watching today. Those are the kind of things that I enjoy doing. And Substack is a place that I found allows me to connect kind of all of those dots.
Yeah, we think about that a lot too at Bookham because, like, for so long, book clubs have always been peer to peer and in person. But as things have changed online, you don't really get those opportunities to have these long form conversations where we can do video, we can do audio, and all that. So we think a lot about that too. Just how do you continue to have these long form conversations that bring the best out of each other? And you, I mean, you know it well just from like that players grabbing their voices back, right? Because you saw that with the emergence of podcasts and kind of like you're saying with Substack. How have you throughout your career been able to own your voice and especially in a platform where it's kind of like everything's about the shield? Like how do you kind of own your voice in these mediums, or how were you able to?
Man, I think it started really out of necessity, and kind of like protests with athletes saying like we don't need permission to speak up, right? And then you just saw it kind of develop to where guys began to get leverage in the media space by owning their own voice. I don't have to go on ESPN or NFL Network to get to for you to see me. You can come to my platform and it's just, as entertaining. So I think there's a leverage shift there. But one of the things that I kind of look at is, how um, not only where you put your voice, but how you do it,
Yeah.
and for what reasons. And I think that's one of the things that I've been really interested in doing is controlling, because you still get controlled by platforms.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
who allows you, the time you might fight your way to get onto ESPN, but you get 5 minutes and you better say something that sticks. And I found like writing to be just a better medium. It's something that it might not, be contagious. It might not go viral, but it's always there and people can go back on it and remember, okay, yeah, you did say that.
See?
And there's this ability to move with it and breathe without trying to compete. And for me, I don't know, I just find that to be much more comfortable. It's much more engaging to me. And so I'm finding communities, like Substack and other book clubs and readers that really started, with me writing my book. That exercise kind of opened up Pandora's box.
No, that's good. And speaking of writing in your book, talking about what winners don't tell you. Talk to us a little bit about because you talk about this in the book that draft process, like coming into the league and those moments. Can you talk about working for something for so long and finally getting it, and then even just talking about like those moments like a Shador where like there's a whole other side of it where you work and you don't get recognized in that moment, but now you have to go out and prove yourself. So just talk about that moment in your life.
Yeah, it's the moment where, the glass kind of shatters and you realize that there is a really stark separation between business and the game. The game, you've convinced yourself that this is a family environment, it's a team. That if you play well, you almost deserve these things. And then you're hit really quickly with that. No, this is a business. Everything that you have, you're allowed to get, that you've been given. And that sometimes must earn, and sometimes, you don't have control in the situation, which is what we just saw with Shador. But the only thing you can control is how you show up every day, what you do on the field. And I think that's the beautiful part about the sport, is that really we all show up for that game day thing. All of the business, the locker room, gripes, what's happening with ownership and league, that's not what we're here for. We're here to see how y'all come together in spite of all of that and overcome. And I think that's the beautiful part about football. And as I kind of reflected on my time, giving me even a new perspective of how to watch this game, it's kind of the game within the game.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about like playing for these like a range of different leaders? Like even from you got players, so you got like Sean, or your coaches. I got Sean Payton, and you got players like Vilma, Roman Harper, and the list kind of goes on in those spaces. And then talk to us a little bit because in the book you talk about how you had these two kind of sides of your career. You had the New Orleans side, and then you had the Philadelphia side. And Philadelphia is like you really taking over in that leadership spot. So talk about first kind of being a mentee and then being a mentor and kind of what you've learned from different leadership styles.
Yeah, one thing about me is I learn from everything. Like I observe and I try to take notes, even if I'm not explicitly asking questions or saying anything, I'm learning from every example that I have. And so in New Orleans, my first 5 years was really learning a lot from leaders like Drew Brees. I'm watching how he prepared. He'd do small things like he'd throw the ball, and then afterwards he would, with no ball in his hand, he would go through his motion as if he threw three more passes. And he was just going through his reads. And he would do that every single day, no matter his walkthrough, things like that. So you see the habits of greatness. And okay, I take notes there. I can see how Jonathan Vilma, as a defensive captain, had the respect of every coach, every player. What he said went. And it didn't matter if this was a defensive coordinator, head coach, or player. And so you understand what real command looks like. And the reason that he did it is because he was the most prepared on defense. He knew what he was talking about. He was a smart player. So you understood like, okay, respect comes with these habits and these things you do. You don't just get handed these keys. And so I just picked these things up. And when I got to Philadelphia, suddenly I was forced into the situation where now I'm the older leader in the group. And suddenly I'm in the forefront, and I pulled on a lot of those references to think about how to navigate these situations. Like, okay, we're not doing well, or as a coach that players aren't feeling, how do I still manage this? I can pull directly from our struggling season in 2012 when we were, losing back. How did the leaders deal with that? I did that my whole career, and I think that's what really made me a dynamic leader is because I was around a bunch of dynamic leaders and learned from each of them. I couldn't do everything, but there were small things that I could take from every person out there and apply it to new situations.
And it hasn't been the same way for like business too. Like, is the same entrepreneurial leadership style that comes with that? Do you see it bleed into entrepreneurship for you?
Even more so, I found myself leaning even more because in football, you're in an environment where everybody is bred like you to be a high performer, to get critique, to be, to be scrutinized daily without taking it personal. Outside of that environment, it is a lot more feelings and like emotions and just nuances to human interaction that you have to navigate. Not everybody's built the same or has the same background. And I found myself having to learn from different leaders on how they, deal with person to person interactions, or how they deal with, with conflict or morale and things like that. Where in football, you can just get to the bench, flip over a cooler and get everybody, riled up for the moment. You can't do that in your, in your Tuesday business meeting. So
Yes.
I've definitely had to adapt and learn from various folks around me.
Yeah, and to that about like business, because Steve Jobs talks about like make something wonderful, like make something that's like a really great product and give it to the world. Like put your energy, your soul, and everything into it. So even with that, like your love of art and business as a form of art, like how have those things kind of fused together for you to build like really great products, great teams, and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one of the things that I've started to focus on was not necessarily trying to create great products. Because there are all every day there's something being made. But for me, it's like, how do I solve problems? That was my value as a player. I can solve solutions in real time on the field. That solve problems for myself, my teammates, and my coaches. How do I do that in the real world? It particularly through my skill set. And I love things like art. I love giving back. I love writing. And so what I've figured out is how do I combine all of these to make them work together. So when I'm doing the things that I'm gifted to do, when I'm doing things I enjoy to do, they're actually in alignment with my profession and how I want to give back to the world. So a great example of that is this art auction that we're doing with Phillips. They're doing their annual spring sale, and 6 pieces have been donated from some of my favorite artists, with all proceeds going to the Malcolm Jenkins Foundation to fund our programs across the country. And so that's again another opportunity where we're allowing people, one, to learn about these Black artists and learn about my passion of collecting, to be able to participate in it at a level that is attainable, but then also that participation directly having impact on our programs and going directly to the kids that we service around the country. And we've been doing this work for 15 years.
Yep.
So as I develop as a human, I kind of take my businesses and apply those nuances to it so that we can continue to do the things that we love through the skills that we have and have the highest impact.
Yeah, I love to hear it. And speaking of the leadership role, one of the biggest career, like in your during your career, you talked about joining the Players Coalition. Can you talk about that tension between like being a leadership on social issues, sometimes being misunderstood, being labeled a sellout, like by your own people, that you are all fighting for a common mission, even if it like how people go about it, it might be different. But can you talk about that and just learning to stand in your principles, despite some of those pushbacks?
Yeah, I think sometimes, we love put it this way. I had to get to the point where I had to remind myself that I chose everything. When it comes to standing up, on business or standing up for what's right, don't waste your time and energy complaining about the blowback. You knew the blowback was coming. And I think that's a mistake I see a lot of people doing. I saw it even around that time and had to fight the urge, right? Like I'm doing all of this work and then you've got people telling you should do it different. And it's like, well, okay, ignore the opposition. What I wasn't ready for was people who I thought were on my side also critiquing the way you do it. And you realize that, yes, leadership is a lot like driving and with a
Mhm.
lot of backseat drivers.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody sees the full perspective that you have. And you'd be foolish to stop and turn around while you're driving. So it's one of those things where you need to find some good co-pilots, some people who also can see what you're navigating and give you some perspective about blind spots. But other than that, you have to understand that that is just a cost in doing business. Don't waste your energy on things that you knew were coming.
Yeah, I like that. And you had a good piece in your Substack where you're talking about like Jalen Hurts and how his leadership and kind of those things evolve. Can you talk about just like those tough decisions where you have to decide like, do I stand on my own principles or do I do this or what's the cost of it? Like, how do you kind of do the cost analysis of, or maybe there is none. He's like, I'd rather just stay true to my word and what it is.
Well, to be honest, it's funny because sometimes and most times I think those situations choose you.
Mm,
And
okay.
then you're forced to choose who you want to be in this moment. And I think that this Jalen thing is a great opportunity, right? Like, okay, you went to win a Super Bowl. You weren't going to try to get to the White House. That was a consequence of something you didn't control. But now that there's this decision to be made, you have to choose to go or not. And what's really cool, not cool, but heroic about him not going is not just the statement of not going, it's that he's the quarterback and MVP of the team. He has to answer the question why. He
Mm,
hasn't done it yet, but eventually, they open up the locker room, and the media comes in, they're going to come directly to him, and he's going to have to speak on why he didn't go. And that is when we'll see who he wants to be in this moment, what his voice is going to carry. Is he going to say anything? Sometimes truth puts you against the establishment or against the team. And how you navigate that could determine how the people who look up to you even perceive it. So he's now chosen, because he chose not to go, he's decided to put himself at that intersection, of which what he says next could be pretty interesting and it's and impactful.
Yeah, I think about even like from your career, you played in so many different eras. You played in like the end of the like the hard-nosed football era. Then you get
Yeah.
into like the like I
Full
said,
Goodell
the
era.
2016 era. Then you even played even into the George Floyd era. So there's like, and then not
Yeah.
to mention you went through the concussion era and how players now can't hit the quarterback in a different way. I just kind of think about that and how you've been able to navigate those spaces. So like kind of talk about, did you feel like you were in moments or did it feel like this was just, I had to get through these day by day, things that are going on?
And life is, we fool ourselves when we want things to stay the same, especially good things. They take work and they adjust. And just like the game, it catches up to you. If you're not constantly working on it, then you don't last long. And I think that is not just a mentality to have if you're a high performer or to last in somewhere like the NFL. I think that's a great life mentality. To constantly be working, whether it's relationships, whether it's at your craft, whether it's at your business, you're constantly trying to improve. There's no such thing as coasting. You're either getting better or you're getting worse.
Yep.
And yeah, I've really just approached that. It's when you have that mentality, it's no longer about, like a day-to-day thing. It's every day is an active game. Today, when I closed my book, I either got better or I got worse today. And I have to reconcile that.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the Malcolm Jenkins Foundation and some of the amazing work you all are doing and have done and kind of just your overall thought process?
Yeah, so this year, this June, we're celebrating 15 years of service. My mom is the president of the foundation, and we started literally my second year in the NFL with just the idea that we could effectuate positive change in the communities that I called home. And we started at that point in time in New Orleans, because that's where I was. And since I've expanded to over 4 states around the country, everywhere that I call home. So we operate in Columbus, Ohio, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, all throughout the state of New Jersey, where I'm from, and then New Orleans, Louisiana. And we meet communities where they are, so we don't try to have a one size fits all type of model. Every community is different and has different needs, so we show up with as much resources as possible to the needs that are present. And yeah, and what we're trying to do now is really expand. I've officially been doing work in the community longer than I've been playing in the NFL, which is kind of cool to think about. And so we're looking at like, developing partners of how we scale our programs, how we get to people outside of our, who we can touch physically, how do we virtualize some of our experiences, how do we hoard some more resources and people who are looking to get involved and have impact? How do we use ourselves as a vehicle, to really spread that collective impact?
Yeah, we talk a lot to a lot of entrepreneurs. Like, how do you kind of define like impact, or what do you kind of look for? Like, what do you, when you I guess when it's all said and done, like, what do you hope that you are really able to accomplish through the impact of the
Yeah, I
foundation?
know a lot of times, we try to value impact with numbers and data and things, but I always those numbers and data always have to go back to people. And I think we're in it for people. And so whether you're somebody, who if you're effectuating one person or you're effectuating thousands, it's still all valuable. And so I think when we get too caught up in, the stats, then people feel like if they're not the top gun, then they don't need to participate. I feel like there's plenty and there's room for everybody to get involved. I think my biggest role is highlighting why why it's beneficial for us all to invest in these underserved communities. A lot of the times we look at this stuff as charity, and what that does is it immediately paints these communities as ones of lack of need that are deficient and don't have. And realistically, they have everything: the skill set, the determination, the drive. It's simply small things like the know-how in this particular skill, or really exposure to a different environment that I've seen in the 15 years of work that I've done that really make the difference. It doesn't cost a whole lot to actually change these communities or impact these kids. it takes people to believe in them, to believe that this is valuable and invest their time and effort into that value.
Yeah, I was listening to a Magic Johnson podcast, and he was talking kind of similar to what you're talking about. Just like the impact is a lot of time it's in the process, like actually going in and making a difference in these communities and making the change, especially from places you grew up and you know the kids and the situation that they've been to. Can you talk about that, like just building business while being a player, while maintaining it, and kind of what I know you talked a little bit. I think a lot of people you talked mentioned in the book about like the documentary or the broke documentary and how that kind of sparked your change and thinking process about money. But just talk to us about like how challenging it is to start a business while playing professional sports in that space.
Yeah, I think, for anybody, it's challenging. I think we don't have that conversation enough, right? Like we try to pin it on athletes and like Black folks, but realistically, there are not a lot of people who actually know what to do with money. Whether we see it with doctors, lawyers, kids who come into making a lot of money out of college and do the same exact thing that we see our athletes do. And so for me, I'm always somebody who asks why. Like I try not to just go with things. So if you tell me 80% of athletes are going broke, I'm gonna ask why and start to figure out like what can I do to not have that be me. And what I realize is very, very easy to do that. And so when I'm looking at okay, well, who are the successful athletes that are doing it well in business? All of them start while they're still playing. So they're able to make investments when they don't need the money or the cash, they're bringing in cash flow. They're able to leverage their celebrity to get in rooms, get in the best deals, get the information that they need to make wise bets. And they do it in boring business, the
Yep.
the best ones at least. So when I look at like a Junior Bridgman is probably my favorite example, who did it all through franchising, started with understanding how to run one Wendy's and grew it into a billion-dollar corporation. Those are the models that like while I was playing, I started looking at. And what I realized is that I can't do by myself. And that's the beautiful thing about anything that's worth building. It takes a team. And as a person who's played team sports my whole life, that's actually something I'm particularly well skilled at doing
Yep.
is building teams and navigating and leading teams.
Yeah.
So I was able to build with people around me, looking for talent within my ecosystem, and then figuring out ways to collaborate with that talent. And we started Malcolm Inc., which is completely made up of either folks I grew up with that I now do business with, or my family members.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you so much for writing the book because even like I think about like a Junior Bridgman and all the knowledge and wealth and information he had, I would love to just see it like put in the book. You talk about it in your Substack about just black founders and investment and how how much money doesn't go to those situations. So it's always good to read books by black entrepreneurs that are really building and thinking about community and growing there. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for that because I think putting your words into a book where people can go access it and learn from you is just always super important.
No, thank you.
Yeah, can you kind of as we wrap up, I want to get into your writing a little bit, but I do want to say ask you a question because you brought up in your book you talk about winning Super Bowls in two different cities that have never won one. Did you have more fun or in winning New Orleans or Philadelphia? Like what was the experience like in winning in those two different cities that have so much culture too?
Yeah, I think, from a celebration standpoint, they were very, very similar. Like you said, this is the first one for either city. They have a historic, kind of team and a historic relationship with the team in the city in both. So to be part of the first one, like I saw mirrored experiences with like grown men crying. Everybody in the city has a story, that they tell about, either someone who was close to dying, who, got to see it before they passed away, or that was they only wish to see it. I've heard that on both ends. I think what was different was my experience of where I was, in New Orleans when I was a rookie where I wasn't the leader of the team. It very much felt like I was on like along for the ride and things are happening 1,000 miles an hour. And it was special to be a part of it, but it was truly, I felt like I was along for the ride. Whereas in Philadelphia, it felt like something I had manifested. Like I used to talk to my teammates, the younger ones all the time about like trying to get them to visualize and imagine what it would feel like to be the first ones to go down Broad Street as Super Bowl champions and Philadelphia Eagles, and what it would mean to this city and what the parade would look like. I used to try to literally get them to visualize it. And so then when we finally boarded the buses to actually take that parade route,
Yeah.
it was like surreal. All like that. As soon as the clock went to zero in the Super Bowl, all of that work and kind of foresight and meditation on that moment, you realize we did that, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, was it, speaking of the book, was it easy to get that forward from Tom Brady after like beating him in a Super Bowl, or just how was it just, I know, I just talked to us about the forward, and then let's talk a little bit about just the impact you want to have from the book as well.
Yeah, no, I think the forward, I will be honest. Tom definitely blessed me with that one. I didn't, after all of the years of battling against him, it's the Ohio State Michigan rivalry there.
Than that.
He definitely blessed me with the forward upon request. But he's one of my favorite athletes and competitors that I've gone against in my life. I've enjoyed my battles. So it was only like fitting. It was definitely right for the book. And I think this book is right on time for today's athlete. I feel like any athlete out there, any parent of an athlete, especially if you're thinking about going collegiate or professional, should read this book just for the experience alone. When you talk about what it's like to be separated from your tribe and having to kind of be, on your own, what it's like to be culturally kind of separated, what it's like to be the first one in your family to deal with opportunities and situations, to not have much guidance and still have to do things like be a top end professional to perform and still do it in a way that makes everybody proud. Those things everybody deals with. If you are, a high performer, you're somebody who's the first, and a lot of the times athletes are. And so even just navigating the business of it all with NIL money and things like that now, how leverage and negotiations work. I even talk about like how I got out of a contract when I didn't have any leverage. And those type of maneuvers you don't really hear many people talk about. Money usually is taboo amongst athletes. So I wanted to put it in the book as an opportunity for people to see my experience, learn from it. We talk about reading plays. So here's my playbook. When you see them coming, you're better equipped.
Yeah, it's cool to see how much life you've lived and some of the impacts that like you think about just these errors and just like, wow, I didn't know you see so much of the game through your story and then just outside of it, the things that you've dealt with. And one of the things you're talking about, like you wrote the story, not just for the outside world, but even for your kids, just to see who you were in these moments and see how you went through these process. Can you talk about that, like being a father and setting examples for your kids, pursuing their goals and, creating an impact there?
Yeah, one thing I notice is, as we go around, my kids travel with me, they'll see people come up, to me and shake my hand or, say thank you or want to take photos. And a lot of the times, they'll ask me like, why are you so famous? Why do people always, no matter where we are, why do people treat you like this? And I realize that they had never heard my story from me. I'm not telling them every day the things that I'm necessarily doing for people. They know I play football. They know people love the Eagles, but they also know that that's not the end all be all of it. And so this was an opportunity for me to realize like, oh yeah, if something were to happen to me, my kids would have to learn it from other writers, from other people telling their perspective. And I've never really calcified this information for them. And so even in that, it's like, okay, yeah, I need to leave breadcrumbs. I need to, there needs to be rhymes and reasons to the man that they see now. And I know that that's a little bit harder for me to do, in casual conversation.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's hard, like retiring and being what people know you as just this, but then you know yourself as so much more. So it's almost giving that the world a little bit more of you each and every moment through your writing. And one of the things I enjoyed was that you like read your audiobook, so it really felt that person. They felt personal. You've built these media companies. You write your own stories. Like talk to us about like what does it mean to own your own voice and how you are helping others do the same without without preaching, right? Because I think
Yeah.
you've done so many things where you could just be like, this is how you do it. Because a lot of books are like that. So really thinking about it from a an audio, I mean, a audio autobiography perspective.
Yeah, I love archiving and learning. I really feel like my whole purpose in life is just to continuously learn. And through those learnings, it's like leaving behind, the wisdom that I retained from it all. And whether that's through storytelling, whether that's through direct coaching and direct mentoring, or whether it's just by the example and the expansiveness in which I live my life, like that long list of things you introduced me as, all those multi hyphenates are intentional. All right, that is me literally trying everything with no restrictions, and that comes with trials, tribulations, that comes with failures, successes, but it also leaves a beautiful example in breadcrumbs, I think, for people who are trying to live outside of the box, who are trying to come off of the beaten path and do something that is unique to them in a world that is trying to force us into be cookie cutter.
Yep.
That was the fun part about this journey, is that even in telling my story in the way that I did, aligns with that purpose.
Yep.
So it's cool.
No, it's good to hear. And then talk to us a little bit about your writing process. What's a perfect day look like for you writing, and just not even on the book, but even in your own personal writing. Like, what does a perfect day look like for you?
Yeah. So the book was
Yeah.
nothing close to perfect. I ended up, it took me probably 2 years to just conceptualize the book and really get it all together. Like I talk about starting it in 2020, but I really wrote the book, the version that everybody has, in 30 days. The last 30 days that it needed to be to be done. And that was we just had didn't really work out with a few ghostwriters we had on the project. And so it was like, well, you got to do it yourself. And so I put myself in a training camp, like mindset. Just woke up at 5 o'clock every day. This is, what I did. Just put myself into a situation that's familiar. And what I realized is like that got my creative juices flowing. I was focused. I knew what I was getting ready to do. And so that's part of my like practice now is one, I have to plan ahead of when I'm going to be locked in so I can block out all distractions. I can create, the space and time to write. And then I've always found it helpful to, wherever I am, carry a notebook and taking pictures.
Yep.
Photography is something that I've been doing now for the last 3 years,
Cool.
and it's helped me with my writing, just remembering things and thinking about connections. Something about framing it in an image and still and keeping it, and then being able to come back to it and feel different about it, I think helps me when it comes to trying to translate those feelings and emotions in the color of it all through writing.
Now, I'll let you hear. I just want to get to some rapid fire, and then we end with our last question. But so for the rapid fire, what's an art piece that not enough people are talking about that you wish more people look into?
Ooh, Lauren Halsey. She did a piece last year, oh no, 2023, I believe. It was on the top of the Met in New York. It was one of the largest, no, it was the largest uh installation they've ever had on their rooftop. And what she did was basically took like these Egyptian style architecture. So it was like, and used hieroglyphics, but they were all from like South Central LA references. So signs, you had like the hairdos from like a barbershop signs. And then she had these sphinxes that were very much in like African American stylized. So they had like the big Bengal earrings with the name in the middle. They had the baby hair. And it was so familiar yet so regal on the top of such an important building. And now they're taking that and bringing it to her neighborhood out in LA for it to be enjoyed by the community, which I think is something that's impactful when you talk about transforming stories and communities through art. I think Lauren Halsey is somebody that everybody should be paying attention to. And I was at the Kendrick Lamar concert recently, and in one of his final sets, her artwork
Oh,
is the
cool.
backdrop that he uses for the set. So she's definitely somebody that I think is on a lot of people's radar, but more people need to know.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And then another question is like, what's a moment from your football career that felt like art in motion?
There was there's a lot of plays like that. Man, I think one of the plays I think that's probably the easiest and most recognizable is the last play of the Super Bowl, Eagles versus Patriots. Brandon Graham knocks the ball out of Tom Brady's hand. Well, it's like when you go back and watch that film, it's not just a great pass rush by Brandon Graham, although it is great awareness, puts his hand right on the ball, the pocket is collapsed, but the coverage works right along with it. And we broke this down as a defense maybe the next year afterwards, just talking about how things work together. I had a zone drop that, I made sure I took away the deeper route before I gave up the shorter, and which caused Tom Brady to just hesitate just a little bit and pump, which gave Brandon just enough time to get there. We had a nice push up the front of the pocket, which collapsed the pocket, didn't give Tom Brady anywhere to move. And so all of a sudden now there's all of these pieces on the field that are orchestrating at the same time that create the one opportunity to win this game that brings this enormous amount of energy to this one city. It's like that's kind of those small things uh when you find them, when you realize how large they are, you get fixated on it. It's a reason they call this a game of inches.
So,
And it's in those inches that I love to try to make the difference.
perfect. Yeah. So it's a two-sided question. This way we always end the podcast. The first side of that question is what should be in a founder's toolkit?
And the founder's toolkit should be um they definitely, the first thing I was going to say, if you're a founder, you need to figure out how to get to the money. So you need to find a room with people who you need a Rolodex, a wallet, whatever it is that you need to manage contacts with people who are looking to put money into the things that you have.
Yep. And then on the other side, what should be in a writer's toolkit?
I think any writer, at least for me, is necessary to have a camera in your toolkit. That and I mean, it sounds obvious, but a notebook, and not to write the finished project, but to just constantly be taking notes. I'm somebody who cannot hold it all in my mind, so photos and a notebook at all times is clutch.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. Let us know if there's anything coming up into your world. And thank you again for writing your book. Everybody make sure to go get a copy of What Winners Won't Tell You. But yeah, let us know anything that's coming up in your world or anything that we should support or where to
No.
find you on the internet.
Yeah, thank you for having me. If you want to support the work we're doing, you can go to themalcolmjenkinsfoundation.org or tmjf.org. You can donate there. You can see our calendar of events. You can see all of the programs and what we're doing. Again, we're celebrating 15 years of work. We're looking for partners and people to continue to support. So please donate, volunteer, and share.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Malcolm, for being on the podcast. Truly a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.